everyone. Thanks for joining us, those in person and remote. Before we get started, I want to turn it over to ERG, our contractor, who's going to run through some of the logistics before the meeting. And I hope that was loud enough for folks.
Thank you. Yes, so I'll just provide some quick logistics. My name is Sophia, and I'm with ERG, a contractor supporting this effort. And again, I'll start by providing some logistics for the Zoom meeting. This presentation is available with virtual interpreters in Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, Haitian Creole, and American Sign Language, ASL. In-person interpretation is available in Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese. Zoom attendees should use the interpretation channel indicated by the globe icon in the Zoom control panel to select your preferred language. English speakers should select English so they can hear any translated comments. Closed captioning will be auto-generated. If you are a virtual attendee and would like to use telephone audio for the meeting, please click on the small arrow next to the microphone icon, select Switch to Phone Audio, and follow the directions provided. Virtual attendees can send an email to meetings@erg.com with any technical questions related to meeting logistics. If you would like a translated version of the presentation slides, please go to the Environmental Justice Council website at the link in the chat. You will find a translated set of presentation slides there. This meeting is being recorded and will later be available for viewing through a link that will be posted on the Environmental Justice Council website. Virtual attendees can submit questions in the Q&A box. If you would like to make a comment, we have time allotted during the public comment session. Please wait for this time to make comments. During the public comment section, please raise your hand and I can unmute you. If you are commenting in another language, please speak into your language channel and your interpreter will translate the comment into English. You may also type your comment into the Q&A box and I can read it out loud. Please make sure to keep comments under 2 minutes to ensure that everyone has a chance to speak. In-person attendees who are asking questions, please make sure to speak into the microphone provided so that virtual attendees can hear you. For all speakers, please speak slowly to accommodate the interpreters. Please use simple language and minimize the use of acronyms. I would like to remind the council members to only use the chat function for meeting logistics, for no other communication in accordance with open meeting law. We are also asking all council members to leave their cameras on for the whole meeting. Now I'll turn it over to Maria Belen Power to go over agenda and roll call.
Thank you, Sophia. And thank you to ERG, our contractor, who has been helping us facilitate these meetings for, with me, 2 years almost, and just really grateful for all of the logistics. It takes a big effort and a lot of folks making sure that these meetings can be hybrid, that we can provide interpretation, that there's snacks, there's water. So just really grateful to ERG. Also want to thank the Framingham Public Library, which we are in. So thank you for hosting us. And also want to recognize members of our team. So Jonathan Guzman is here, Director of EJ. Caroline Lemoyne is here. Yep, I see you, Deputy Director of EJ Environmental Justice, and Oleander Stone, Director of Climate Justice in the climate team. I always forget people's titles, but thank you all for being here. And I also want to thank Eversource for a great tour that we just had of their geothermal pilot project, which we will be hearing more about. I will now, can we go to the next slide, please? Great, so this is the agenda, and then after the agenda, we'll do roll call, but the agenda includes public comment, as always, at the beginning and at the end of the meeting, and today we'll be discussing and learning about geothermal project, the one that we just toured, and rates 101 for us to learn more, but also be able to spread the word about how rates are, what your utility bill means, and how to read your utility bill. Because that's really critical information that's important, not just for the council, but for everyone who's listening in. And with that, I will pass it to ERG for roll call, just to make sure that we have quorum.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Sophia, one more thing.
Of course.
One of our members has stepped down. Her name is Namrita Kapoor. Just want to publicly and here in our meeting thank Namrita. We are super grateful for all of the time and meetings and dedication that she gave us. And we hope to do some celebratory meeting at some point so that we can be with her and thank her in person. And so just wanted to give folks a heads up about that as we go into a roll call.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, and Amrita. I'll now conduct roll call to ensure quorum, and I'd like to remind our virtual council members to please respond verbally. All right, I'll start with Kalila Barnett.
Yep, here.
Madeline Fraser Cook. Melissa Harding Ferretti.
Present.
Cheryl Hawley.
I'm here.
Caroline Hahn.
Here.
Lydia Lau.
Here.
Marcos Luna.
Here.
Peter Matthey. Sophia Owen.
Here.
Jen Salonetti.
Here.
Patricia Spence.
Present.
Ari Zorn. Miles Gresham. And Maria Belen Power.
Present. So do we have quorum, Sophia?
I believe we do.
Great. Awesome, thank you. And so now the next agenda item is public comment, and I just want to remind folks that this is a change that we made a few months ago, where we are introducing, or we're allowing folks to comment at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting. So folks who want to speak and have other commitments, they don't have to spend 2 hours waiting for them to be able to share their concern or their comment. And the same goes for, allowing folks to stay and do it at the end of the meeting in case they want to do that as well. So now we're going to public comment portion, and again, passing it to ERG.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to just go over some logistics for making a public comment. Folks who are making an in-person comment, please go to the podium and speak into the microphone. If you're unable to walk to the microphone, just raise your hand and we will bring it to you. If you are speaking in a different language, an interpreter will translate your comments. For our virtual attendees, if you are speaking in another language, you can raise your hand, and once you are unmuted, you can speak into your language room. The interpreter will translate what you say into the English room. You can also submit written comments through the Q&A box, and I will read them aloud. Please remember to keep your comments to 2 minutes only. Finally, I'd like to remind everyone to speak slowly for our interpreters and to keep your comments to 2 minutes or less, once again, so everyone has a chance to speak. Thank you. So I don't see anything in the Q&A box yet, any written comments. As a reminder, you can raise your hand if you're online and you wish to make a comment. And if there's anyone in the room who was wishing to make a comment, you can either raise your hand or stand up and we can call on you.
So if there's no comments, Sophie, I think we can move.
Yep, no comments
Okay.
online, so feel free to move along.
Great, thank you, Sophia. And now we'll turn it over to our first agenda item. So I want to introduce Nikki Bruno from Eversource.
Really quick, Maria Belen.
Yes.
The approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Sophia.
Absolutely.
So can I get a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting, which was 2 months ago?
With the Ferretti, so moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussions about the minutes? All in favor, say aye.
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 Don't we have to do roll call for
You're
that?
right, I'm sorry. I
will-
keep going back and forth between everyone says aye or nay and doing it person by person. But yep, we did agree that person by person is probably the best because of a virtual setting.
I
So,
can move through the roll call.
yeah, so we'll
now.
pass it to Sophia to do the roll call for the minutes.
Yes, so Kalila Barnett,
Approve.
Madeline Frazier Cook, Melissa Harding Ferretti,
Yes, approved.
Cheryl Hawley. Yes. Caroline Hahn,
Yes.
Lydia Lau,
Yes.
Marcos Luna,
Yes.
Peter Matthey, Sophia Owen, Jen Salonetti,
Abstain, I wasn't present.
Patricia Spence,
Approved.
Ari Zorn, Miles Gresham, and Maria Belen Power.
Approve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sophia. And now Nikki, again, from Eversource. So Nikki's going to talk to us about the geothermal project. Nikki is a president of Clean Technologies for Eversource. And just a quick snippet, geothermal technology is a heating and cooling system that uses renewable power from the earth. And so Eversource will share about the first of its kind pilot here in Framingham. So we'll pass it to you, Nikki.
Thank you, and good to be with you all tonight. I'm gonna just, okay. So I know some of you went out on the tour. Hopefully everyone enjoyed seeing some of the facilities in real life, or not seeing them, because many are underground and restored at this point. But I wanted to start off just by giving a little bit of an introduction on how we even got here for folks that aren't familiar. And so really this pilot actually came out of a rate case, an NSTAR gas rate case, one of Eversource's subsidiary companies here in Massachusetts. And what was ultimately approved was a mixed-use, dense urban location by which to try this networked system. So when I say mixed use, I mean commercial loads, residential loads, and this is so important because for geothermal technology to work really well, to be most efficient, you want those different loads.
Excuse me. I'm so sorry. We're getting mic feedback.
Yes, I thought it was me. Thank you.
Let me push it away. Let me push it away. Oh, okay. Is this better? Is this better?
No. Could you possibly try to use for our AV techs? Is there maybe another mic on that's causing interference? It looks like we're getting it from other mics in the room too.
I can walk around if it's easier. So just again, some background where I was saying, how about this? If someone can control the slides, I can go away from this. I was never a good dancer, so the stage is not my forte. So where I was going with just getting some background set is really this came out of this is a demonstration project out of a rate case. We had an idea. Of
We're
where
still
we
getting
wanted-
feedback.
what
I'm so
characteristics
sorry.
We wanted. Oh, up further.
Anna, when I talk into this mic, do you hear me? Do you hear feedback?
Oh, that's good.
Okay, so let's use this mic.
Great.
Sorry, Jen.
All right.
So you can come back here.
Yay.
There we go. We troubleshoot real quick.
Jonathan and ERG saving.
We'll just share this.
Is this okay? Still all right? All right. Okay, I'll zoom through so we don't lose any minutes here on this slide. But in short, we didn't receive a prescriptive location, a prescriptive set of, we want 25% residential customers to participate in this. We had boundaries in the order that we received from our regulator by which to set up this demonstration pilot. And so really what all that is to say is that we had to kind of write the rule book about where to even cite this type of project, what would go into citing a project like this. And so I think what's really unique is the way we approach this was not alone. And we used a cross-functional group of members, some who are in this room, some who were community advocates, who were environmental advocates. It wasn't just the utility and the DPW sitting down to say, geez, where should we put this new set of infrastructure? And I think at the end of the day, that really helped us move the project forward. So today, when I'm talking about this, you'll see a lot of threads around involving a wide range of stakeholders to get something done actually more effectively and more efficiently. Okay. So what you see on screen here probably feels like, fireworks on the page, some schematic drawings, and really you're seeing the square mile loop of the actual project. That's the thick black line. And those kind of spider-like tendrils are really the bore fields. And so all the green houses, if you can see them there, or buildings rather, are connected customers to our loop. So we began looking at the site selection, like I mentioned, as soon as we got the order in 2020, late 2020. In 2021, we had announced that the city of Framingham was where we were going to site our project. And how we even got there was really a mix of qualitative and quantitative factors. So we looked at things like depth to bedrock, conductivity, technical factors of the geology in the area, but we also looked at qualitative factors. Would the host community be supportive? Would they help us, really welcome the idea here? Was this an environmental justice community? Was this a place where we had mixed customers, mixed residential load, mixed commercial load? And so all that to say, we used and what we tried to make was an objective weighting system. So we had a pass-fail set of criteria. It was kind of helpful to have an order from your regulator, right? You had to adhere to some conditions in the order, and if it didn't adhere to them, we couldn't go there. But then in the second phase, it was really about balancing those technical factors and those qualitative factors to find what we thought would be the best site to test this type of technology. And where we ended was, like I said, this square mile loop, a one pipe system that we designed, and that design work really went through 2022 into early 23. And then by that point, we had also completed our customer acquisition, which I'll talk a little bit more about in our interactions in the community. And where we landed was roughly about 140 customers, 37 buildings, a mix of commercial, municipal, and residential buildings. And when I say residential buildings, every type, right? So apartment style buildings, duplexes, single family, and the whole complement of the system is flanked essentially by 3 main bore fields. One, if you saw the tour, in the parking lot where we typically start, and then 2 satellite bore fields on either end of the loop to help balance the load. So how did we get the customers to come onto the system? We use a term called canvassing, where, like it sounds, we'll go out into a neighborhood, knock on doors, meet with community members, with actual residents and prospective customers. And we use that process to talk to folks about, did you even know what geothermal technology was? Would you be willing to participate as part of our pilot? And this may seem pretty ordinary or pretty routine. It was a lot of what we did on our gas sales team, which we've now renamed to be our customer thermal solutions team. But what is unique here is that we knew, because this was going to be a little bit different, we wanted to make sure that we tried to troubleshoot things that the community may or the customers may come up with as questions or roadblocks. And so we actually worked with the city of Framingham because at the time there were utility scams running rampant. And so here we are going out to show customers we have a quote unquote free offering for them, and we didn't want them to say, oh, is this another utility scam? So we did things that seem very simple, but were really impactful to say, partnering with the city to have a city letterhead to say, this is a great opportunity for you as a resident or as a business owner in Framingham to take advantage of it. We encourage you to, use all the Eversource information to come to our own city website. We had a digital strategy around this as well to make information available, and that really helped everybody's credibility in the process. So we had scripts developed, training, we sent our folks out, and I know the note says it took about a week and a half to get that very high
Excuse me.
participation rate.
I apologize. Could you just slow down slightly for our interpreters?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. That week and a half is pretty incredible. And I say that because even in the height of, say gas expansion, it took a few months to get that high of a participation rate. And we think obviously we were sharing with customers, prospective customers, that we would be basically paying for the HVAC installation in their building, as well as any of the upstream network that we would have to install, but they would still have to pay for their electricity bill. So it wasn't entirely free, but we do think that was a nice incentive to take this journey with us for a first step out. We made sure we had all of our identification, made people feel comfortable, and depending on the customer, the time we spent with them varied. Some folks wanted 15 minutes, some folks wanted multiple hours. And we were willing to sit and provide that personal touch because we know that this is really about relationship building. And we feel like that was a great first step to build that trust with the prospective customers and community. So on screen here, I'm not trying to make you read all the words, just wanted to give you a flavor of some of the documents that we were providing to our customers. And we actually have copies here in the room in the back that have been translated into multiple languages. And I'm proud to report in our Framingham pilot, we actually did make sure that we knew what the top 3 languages in the neighborhood were, and we translated materials into those languages. So you see on the left here some door hangers we would leave, some pictorial representations of the process to install a geothermal service line and what the system looked like, and then information about joining us at events like town meetings or gatherings where folks could feel free to ask questions, come with their neighbors, and just generally interact with our project team. So I encourage you to take copies if you're in the room, and if you want and you're online, we're happy to coordinate getting those materials to you. How's my pace? Is this okay? I'm a fast talker, so I apologize. So we moved into construction, and this is probably one of the most painful parts, right? If you're a resident or a business owner dealing with an open trench, rerouting the traffic, even traffic or congestion due to the construction. But again, I'm proud to report we try to maintain this mantra of we want to hear about the complaints first. We want to hear about the pain points before the city has to deal with them or before others in the community have to address them. And so we had set up dedicated hotlines that we ran through our customer team that folks could have one single number to call so that they could make sure that they were answered in a timely fashion, or they knew where to be directed to if they had any questions about what was going on. Throughout the entire construction, and even to this time now, we have provided regular digital updates to our customers within the community, just so they knew what was happening. So on any given week during construction, we may have said Normandy Road is going to have some congestion, or will be closed down on this side of the street, all the way to, talking about the latest where we're now moving in outside of construction into regular service, just reminding folks about how to optimize their systems. So we tried to make it short and sweet. We had pictures. We always had our phone numbers available just to make sure that everything was accessible to the customers. What you see here are really our 3 main work streams. So the loop itself on the left, the picture showing the open trench, is very similar to gas main installation. It's installing geothermal main. The middle picture is actually showing one of our drilling techniques, deviated drilling. That instrument, the rig there, is used to install bores. So these bores roughly go down underground about 600 to 700 feet, and they're connected to our loop or to our mains so that we can move that water-based fluid throughout the entire system and take advantage of cooler water temperatures in the summer and warmer temperatures in the winter. And then finally, on the far right is a picture of some of the HVAC work in one of the buildings. Unfortunately, we did not have any new construction, so I'd like to tell everybody we hit the hardest type of conversions first, dealing with 100% retrofits. So that's just one of the HVAC conversions ongoing. This is Cindy Galvin on our team, who we dedicated as our community liaison, our community partner. She was on site just about every day and continues to be on site regularly to be our main point of contact with our customers. This role is new, and we thought it was really important. I don't think anybody had a lot of concern about whether the technology would work. Certainly things to work out, right? Our first step out. But we thought the real key to success for this pilot was going to ensure that the customers liked the service, that the customers enjoyed the experience. And so we tried our best by dedicating staff to ensure the customer experience was really top of mind. She and others on the team were available not only during construction, but leading up to, during the customer acquisition, and even now as we work through things like new bills, new service offerings in their home. And, you know, we thought that this gave a very timely response. And even when we were trying to figure out and troubleshoot ourselves, because this is new to us, having someone there who responds immediately to say, I may not know the answer today, but we'll get back to you in a requisite time period is very helpful to show that you're acknowledging the concerns and that you're taking it upon the company to make sure that you're responsive. You can see our tent there on the left on this picture. I like to compare this to perhaps office hours a teacher would hold outside of school. We wanted to make ourselves available and meet folks where they were. And to me, that's really the definition of equity. We set up shop in front of actually one of our commercial customers in their parking lot every Wednesday during construction. And we didn't do it during work hours. We knew folks were busy. So we would stay later in the day. So at any point in time, a resident or a business owner could come by, say hello. Perhaps they had a concern, a question that they could voice to us. And we thought it was a really impactful thing because we received things like cupcakes. We also received concerns like, I just planted a new flower bed. Please don't run the service line through here. And those are the little things I think that matter. Again, when you think about a wholesome customer experience, it may not seem big on a project team, but it's really important to that customer. And we encourage anybody, even folks in the city or in the neighborhood, to stop by, even if they weren't a customer. We were happy to have them. And again, this was staffed by that community partner and our geothermal project team. So where are we now? It feels like years ago now, but in June, we commissioned the actual loop. And then in the fall, we finished up things like the pump house installation, many of the conversions. And so we're proud to report that customers started taking service over the winter. We certainly have been fine-tuning the network and the customer systems as we learn more about optimizing this network. But we're really in that final restoration mode now and optimizing the actual system. So knowing what winter we've had so far, we have a great data set. And I was telling some folks in the room, If I could have planned this a different way, maybe I would go in service during the summer and not a traditionally cold winter. But again, I'm proud to report the system was really rock solid in terms of performance. So it'll be great data to share as we think about what the future holds for geothermal and these type of networks. So speaking of, this is a very kind of technical way to talk about success. So I might talk about it a little bit differently. But we do want to set this all up for success. So it's not just a pilot. And I think in our whole thought process of from setting up the team internally to interacting with customers, we want to make sure that we're building our bench of skills from the technical perspective, but also that we're making this sustainable for customers. And really what that means is a couple of different things that you see here. Making sure this service is cost effective, making sure the customers actually like it, and making sure that this has good environmental benefits aligned with where the Commonwealth is trying to go for 2050. And, you know, I think of all of these, again, the customer is going to be the trickiest part. We have to make sure that they're accepting this technology, that it meets their needs, that their comfort level is high no matter what the temperature is outside. And, you know, sometimes when you ask a customer what's important to them and you give them a couple of choices, if it's environmentally friendly heating and cooling, if it's cost, if it's, you know, whatever it may be, ultimately cost is a very high factor. And so we're very conscious that this service has to be affordable for folks who want to join networks like these. And while we know that this is the first in the nation, and we expect a lot of costs to come down along the cost curve as more are installed, we want to be thinking about that affordability now. And we expect that the system will have a lot of great technology benefits, both for the gas and electric grids and for our customers. So we're very eager to see those data sets I was talking about earlier to start extrapolating how it performs. But in short, we have a 2 heating and cooling season duration for this pilot. It started in December, so by December 2026, you know, we have an obligation to go to our customers and say whether we thought the system performed well and we want to continue offering this service and what it looks like, or if it didn't. And, you know, that seems like a short span. It feels even shorter to us because we know we can't go to them on December, 31st and say how we feel the system performed. So obviously the connection with our customers, with the community, the city of Framingham is going to continue to be very close, even though we're over, I'd call it the major pain of construction. We're going to continue those relationships as we work towards moving this into a more sustainable service offering. So with that, I will pause, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Nikki. That was super informational, and I think, at least for me, gave me deeper understanding after the tour to just see both in person and to hear your presentation. We'll open it up to questions or comments from the council members. If the public does want to chime in, we will have a portion after the rate 101 for folks to chime in. I just want to check if the council members have questions or comments. Yeah, go ahead, Caroline.
Thank you, Nikki. That was really, really informative. I just we heard the really good news on the tour about a second loop as well. And I was curious, this sounds like such a playbook for success here. What do you think is going to be, like, are you going to do anything different or?
Yeah, no, thank you, Caroline. So Caroline mentioned a second loop. We, with the city of Framingham and with HEAT, have secured DOE funding to expand our loop. And so we finished the design of that, the feasibility and design of that. And now we, just before the holidays, or end of year, I should say, last year, we were told we were down selected for the implementation funding. As many of you know, the DOE has been on a pause, relooking at all of the grant funding, so we're cautiously optimistic that hopefully negotiations pick back up. But as to what we do differently, you know, I think the retrofits, and this is no different from air source, right? Any sort of massive invasive conversions you're gonna have to do in a building costs money. We have the battle scars of what we ran into, whether it was mold, asbestos, just every different heating and cooling system you could imagine, based on the different building types here. And so I think we're trying to understand how can we be more efficient about coordinating the retrofit conversions. The loop was installed, I don't want to say easily, nothing is easy, but felt very familiar to us as a gas utility. And in fact, from a budgetary perspective, it was almost exactly as we would expect for installing gas main. So pretty good on our first try. The bores were unique, but also, again, once we hit our stride with the drillers, it felt like that was well coordinated. Pump houses, they're, you know, fabricated buildings, you know, again, we are very similar in our skill set. So to us, it's really trying to understand how we perhaps arrange some of the procurement and how we coordinate the residential or in commercial conversions this time around.
Can I ask, unless folks have a question? Yeah, go ahead, Mark. You mentioned in the beginning that this came out of a rate case. Can you just, for folks online or in the meeting, maybe 30-second, what is a rate case and what does that mean sort of in real life terms?
Sure. So I defer if anybody wants to jump in with more expertise, but a rate case is a regulatory proceeding that utility companies, in this case it was the gas company, but utility companies can bring before their regulator, making sure that they're collecting the right amount of money to manage their investments. And so typically they're done over a period of years. And so at any given point, you know, certainly the company can approach the regulator and talk about the need to go in for a rate case. You know, I think that from a gas business perspective, because there had been customers added to the gas rate base or customer base, if you will, that had kept us out of a rate case for quite a while. We had been able to add customers and balance the investments we needed to make, ensuring that every person added was to the benefit of other customers in the gas company rate base. But that's the short of it, and maybe the regulatory folks can add if they need to.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Marcos.
Hi. I have a question, a two-part question that are related. You mentioned that you're collecting information from the customers about their experience with that, and I'm curious how it relates on two levels. One is, to the extent, I know it's a pilot project, but to the extent that it affects the cost of energy in these households, I'm curious how you're monitoring that, what you're looking for there. And that might require a little context too, again, because it's a pilot project, so I don't know how kind of typical it is that they're experiencing. But the other element of that is regard to comfort. I'm wondering how you are collecting or what kind of information you're collecting about that, because one issue I know has come up in Framingham and other urban communities is a concern that some folks, particularly lower income folks, don't always utilize these resources for cooling or heating because of the expense, and therefore expose themselves to more dangerous temperatures because of necessity. So I'm wondering to what extent you'll be able to capture that, and to see if it's kind of addressing that in some way.
Sure. No, it's a great question. And actually, as part of the customer acquisition process, we did do, and you know, it's always illustrative, right? And we were upfront with customers about that, but we tried to model what their savings might be, or where they may remain neutral or perhaps have more expense with this new technology in their homes or businesses. And so we had, and just to back up a little bit with some context, our customer base for this pilot is actually a very diverse set of fuels. We have folks that converted from oil. We have folks that converted from natural gas. We have electric resistance customers that converted. And the electric resistance customers, I just want to spend a second on because they are part of the Framingham Housing Authority. They're elderly, low-income units. And we had estimated somewhere in the range of 60 to 70% savings by utilizing this technology. And so now that we're getting in some of the data, what we were missing was the actual customer usage. We could predict as much as we like, but some folks like their temperature kept at 80, some are at 62, you know, and it all matters. So we're getting in that actual usage and, you know, certainly have to apply it to the latest electric rates. But, you know, we expect that there will be some OpEx savings with a system like this because it's so efficient. And we are seeing, and I'll explain what this means, but a coefficient of performance of around 4. What I mean by coefficient of performance is for every unit of energy that you put in, if you get 1 unit out, it's a coefficient of 1. So this, for every unit of energy that you put in, if you're getting 4 units out, essentially, and I'm oversimplifying, but it's one of the most effective and efficient heating and cooling systems around. So we're still fine tuning and working through that period of making sure everyone's utilizing their system appropriately, et cetera. But that's we're excited about that performance. You also asked a question about measuring comfort and how do we know. We are so intimately engaged with these customers. We know when they're having babies, when they're going to be in and out of their homes from all the work, or what their business entails, you know, and how they like their thermostat set, that we feel we're going to be watching the usage and watching how they're utilizing the system. There's actually data sets that we get through some of the heat pumps that we can kind of triangulate. We also expect that if they're unhappy in any way, we will know because of that close relationship. And we also have a third-party evaluation firm as part of this project that is actually collecting customer data, so surveying on a periodic basis. And we have additional monitoring set up at strategic locations along the loop that will be just added data that we can look at to look at customer usage. And one last thing, Mass CEC did award a grant to HEAT to study geothermal loops like this one. And so they also installed some fiber optic cable in some of our boreholes to get additional information on the system performance, ensuring that, you know, temperatures and different other quantitative measures are getting to the customer service lines.
I see a hand. Pat, do you have a question?
Yes, number one, fabulous presentation and so understandable. Thank you so much. Always helpful, but this sounds wonderful. I'm being a bit nosy. Are there other states calling us right now, wondering how we've done all this wonderful work? Are there people out there from other states studying what we're doing?
Yes, very much so. I can say emphatically because actually we now have, and I'd like to think we're one of the founding members of a utility collaborative, which has utilities across the nation who are wanting to bring this to their home states. And we actually, you know, because we're so far in front, many times it feels like a cross-examination where we're asked a lot of questions, but it's been so exciting to see how everybody has taken in that information, and whether it's legislatively, through a rate case, through some unregulated side of the business, have tried to bring these at the utility level to light. We've actually gotten global outreach. We've had delegations as far as Mongolia come, Ukraine was here. And I mean, that was a really powerful tour because, you know, when you think about a country that's in the middle of a war, already thinking, okay, our infrastructure has been demolished. How can we rebuild in a decarbonized way? And that this makes sense for them to investigate, it's pretty powerful. And it's not just utilities either. You know, we've had a lot of community engagement and opportunities to share how we're interacting. And for us, certainly from the thermal side, I feel like this is how we want to be perceived in the community and in our state, and how we want to do projects going forward. Because when it's in your backyard, it's really personal, right? And so it's been really nice to have that national interaction. And we've learned from others too, to bring ideas back to say, could this work here for the next, or what have you?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Yeah.
We heard about this a little bit on the tour, but I'm wondering if you could talk about.
Oh, sorry,
Sorry, I forgot. We heard about this a little bit on the tour, but I'm wondering if you could talk about where the costs, how the costs were covered for this project, and how long do you think it will take for cost savings to be seen?
Sure. So the actual pilot costs were, like I said, in that rate case, we had put in our best estimate at the time. So back in 2019, there was about a little over $10 million that had been proposed for this pilot. And so what we've been doing is every year we submit, essentially, think of it like if you have to do an expense report, if I tried to oversimplify it, we have to show that we've prudently spent dollars. And so for that last calendar year to get recovery. And the gas rate base, or the gas customer base, is the base at which we're spreading these costs. It's a very minuscule amount and in the context of everything, but again, this is why I said earlier, we are very focused on affordability and ensuring that everything we're trying is very prudent and benefits that rate base. In terms of a payback period, that's what we're trying to work through now, because as you might imagine, if you have a first try at something, we don't expect it to be perhaps the most cost efficient, just because we're learning new strategies about how to deploy it. That's why it was very powerful to see the pipe going in at the same price, right? Certain things that felt very similar from a cost perspective. I do think that the second loop is a really powerful anecdote to your question. We've already seen reductions as much as 30 to 50% in the various phases we've completed. So when you think about design, building on the design, we've seen a reduction in cost already, and this is just the second iteration. We would continue because think of it like a modular build out. The pump house in Framingham, you had to build that, right? That's like the heartbeat of the network. For the second iteration, maybe we have to put some booster pumps in, but we don't have to build another pump house. So you can take advantage of that modular build out. So those are the economies of scale we're looking for.
And then will those type of cost savings then be reflected back to the customers if it's being distributed among the costs being distributed?
So as we hope to do more of these, that's actually a question we're working out now, is what does that cost spread look like payers, and how can we credit, how can we collect in a reasonable way? And so it is under development, I'll say, for right now, and we're hoping to share more on that soon. But we are trying to make sure that this type of offering feels similar in cost as much as possible to some traditional service offerings.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a quick question? Cindy, it's great that that you hired someone sort of dedicated to the work of outreach and getting to know folks and answering concerns. You don't have to tell me where she lives, but do you have folks like Cindy in her team or in your team that either live in the community or live nearby that really understand, sort of the nuances or intricacies of this particular community? I know, that matters in terms of different communities in Massachusetts look differently, and they have different needs. So just curious if that is part of your team, and if it's not, are you thinking about that?
So I just had to brag for a second. So Cindy, we actually, I hate to use the word repurposed because, work is meaningful, right? But she was on the team and we said, you have the right skill set for this. And she jumped in. She does not live in Framingham proper, but I think, you know, when you think about the utility, we work and play here. And so that on a broader level, I completely understand where you're coming from. And it is important because I think, you know, the inner workings of the community, wherever it may be. And I think we've thought about it, but in the context of we're all residents here, that it's almost like it's almost like a foregone conclusion for us because we do feel like we're in the fabric of. But what I will say is the early days of this type of project and I'm talking to the experts here, so forgive me if I get the exacts wrong, you know, wouldn't have necessarily met the equity definitions for all of the, you know, translation services and things that we provided. But we just felt it was so impactful to understand the community, right? And so I remember getting ready for one of the residents only stakeholder meetings that we had, or town hall type meetings. And we were talking on our team, who could we bring that could translate Spanish and Portuguese? And we had somebody because we are the customer team and they often have to do that on the phones. And she volunteered her evening and came, even though it might not have been her direct role. So there very much was a can-do, adaptable attitude from the get-go that everyone just wanted to make this very successful, and they pitched in.
That's great. Thank you. Anyone else have questions right now? Sophia.
Thanks. This has been really interesting. Thank you, Marcos. We heard a little bit on the tour about some of the other sites that were considered, and I know we've talked about other places wanting similar pilots. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those places might be, or how this could look in a different location? Particularly, I'm thinking about some of us are from organizations in Boston or sort of areas that are more dense. Like, what could this be applied there, and what would that look like?
I absolutely think it could be applied there. And I think, you know, the beauty of geothermal is it's a bit of an art and a science. And when you look just to our south or southwest, I guess, in New York City, they're doing this. And so there was an actual, a building that housed celebrities and, you know, a lot of different folks, I should say, and they actually drilled in the basement of that building and received no noise complaints. So it can be done in small spaces, can be installed in very urban areas, and I know some of our New York utilities are embarking on that. And I think, you know, for us, actually, this is a key point. One of the items one of the criteria we had to achieve in this pilot was actually to convert delivered fuels. And believe it or not, a lot of our territories are very urban and there's not many left. So that was one delineator. I also think it was, as we went through the process, it came to light. It was kind of the early days of we didn't have a name for it even, but thinking about the overlay and intricacies of the gas and electric systems. And Framingham is a dual territory for us. And so we thought for our first step out on this, it would be really important to be both the electric and the gas. That was one of those, we were proud we did that because, you know, it is such a hybrid system that we had to look to our electric brethren to help us with any sort of, you know, making sure that the electric system was ready to serve. And so that also factored into some of the decision-making about where to go. Can be done certainly across utilities, but for our first step out, that was important.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a follow-up question related to that. So to my mind, it makes sense in an urban environment to do this because close. So I imagine the loop length kind of matters, but I don't know. So I'm curious about the extent you could say whether this could make sense in a rural context.
You know, I think it'll be site-specific because in a rural area, it may make sense if you like the technology to do an individual ground source install where you could have the space to drill the bore and you could have the ground source heat pump connected, because, you know, you could lose efficiencies of both cost and performance as the homes or buildings are more spread out. Again, doesn't mean it can't be done, but that may be, you know, you'd have to do that math as the individual building owner for sure. I also think load diversity is really important, and just very simply, when I talk about load diversity in the city, you could have a YMCA, might be a cooling load, meaning it needs more air conditioning than heating. And next to that, you could have a residential high-rise, which is a heating load traditionally. And so those type of loads, when they're connected on a system, they balance each other out. And so, you know, there could be a way to take advantage of that more easily in an urban environment where perhaps in a suburban or rural, there's not as much to choose from. But I will say, even rural areas have a town center. So just, that's where the art and science comes in.
Anyone else with questions? Well, Nikki, thank you so much. Super informative. And I do have to say that it's really helpful to hear these topics in very understandable terms, right? I don't like the framing of, you know, technical versus not technical, right? Like, technical knowledge is, you know, varies depending on issue. And you have geology here, chemistry here, physics here, economics. So just really appreciate you sort of, you know, breaking it down the way you did. So thank you, appreciate it.
I didn't like physics, so I empathize, even though I'm a scientist by trade. So thank you for that. And thank you for having me tonight. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And now we're going to invite Erin Engstrom from Eversource. She is Director of Regulatory Affairs at Eversource. And she is going to talk about the components of a gas utility bill and what goes into it, what does it mean, how to understand it better, and also what are some of the ways in which we could be taking advantage of programs if folks are either not enrolled or unaware of them. So pass it to you, Erin.
Thank you. So Nikki gets to talk about all the fun stuff and I get to talk about rates. But thank you for the opportunity. I know that this is top of mind for many right now, especially with the winter season that we've had that's been much colder. I believe it's actually been the coldest winter we've had since 2015, believe it or not. And so we've certainly seen the uptick in customer usage, which then equates to an uptick in customer bills. But there's certainly some other drivers that I was going to talk about tonight from an Eversource perspective. But there are some aspects of the presentation tonight that would span across all utilities as well, such as the components of your bill. So just for background, let's see. Just from an Eversource perspective, and Nikki mentioned, so we have 2 service territories across Massachusetts. We have our NSTAR Gas, which is predominantly in eastern Massachusetts and in southeastern Massachusetts. So that's the, I'm trying to see what color we have here, like almost, you know, we've got like the yellow, that's EGMA territory, former Columbia Gas territory. So so right here, yellow. So we have a couple of towns up in Merrimack Valley. We have the Springfield area, and then we have the southeastern area. That's EGMA, or former Columbia Gas territory. So we acquired Columbia Gas in 2020. And then for NSTAR Gas, we have this green territory here. So we are predominantly in Eastern Mass, but we do have some Western Mass communities as well. So some of the slides, you may see a graphic that's relative to Columbia Gas or EGMA territory, and then you may see a graphic relative to NSTAR Gas. So just to break down the components of your bill, and this is true for all utilities, not just Eversource, but you probably can recognize and are familiar with your utility bill, but ultimately it's broken down into 2 components, your delivery and your supply. And your supply, that is the cost of the gas itself, the cost of the commodity. Either Eversource provides you that gas, or you may want a third-party supplier to provide you that. And the price that we pay for that gas is the price that you pay. So there's no markup, no profit to Eversource. That's a flat rate depending on, what we pay. And then that gets multiplied by the amount of usage you use. The delivery side of your bill, those are the costs that ultimately are used to run the system. And it also includes costs for our energy efficiency programs, as well as the cost to repair leak-prone pipe, as well as the cost to provide assistance to low-income customers. So we have the two components of the bill. We also, on a bill, you'll see your usage history. So you'll see it over the last 12 months. So this is a bill from February. You'll see that in the winter months, you're going to have more usage than you would in the summer months, because that's when the heating season is. And ultimately, how your bill works is your usage, which is measured in therms, so how much of the actual gas you're using in your home, gets multiplied by the rate that is set for either your supply charge or your delivery charge. So the delivery charge is broken on the gas bill. It's broken into 4 components. So you have your customer charge. So that's a flat rate of $10 a month for an NSTAR gas customer, $12 a month for an EGMA customer. And that's the cost of being a customer and for your meter services, things like that. There's a distribution charge, and that's the cost of the distribution work we do out in the field to keep the system safe and to maintain that system, and the cost of the employees running that system. Then there's the revenue decoupling charge. So there's the first wonky word of the night, I would say. And so revenue decoupling is a term that is a regulatory term, and that is a term that ultimately separates out our revenues from your usage. And that is done purposely so that we as a company don't mix our sales and our incentives with ultimately your ability to use less. So if you want to use less, we want to encourage you to use less. And that's really done through our energy efficiency programs. But ultimately, if the revenues that we then basically take are less than what we were ultimately approved to receive from the Department of Public Utilities, there is a kind of like an adjustment or a reconciling mechanism that occurs. And then finally, there's the distribution adjustment charge, and that's the 4th component of your delivery bill. And that's there are many components of the distribution adjustment charge. So there's a lot that goes into that, but the biggest components of that charge are those programs that I had mentioned on the previous slide. So that's programs for Mass Save, your energy efficiency programs to fund low-income customers for a low-income discount rate or an assistance program, and then also the programs to enhance the leak-prone pipes and keep those upgraded. There's other components, different assessments we have to pay, and different other, and very, very small mechanisms, but these are the 4 large ones that are part of your distribution adjustment charge. So that on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see that broken out, those 4 components, and you'll notice it says 173 therms times, and then there's a chart, there's a little rate next to it. So like I said on the previous slide, your usage of 173 therms that month gets multiplied by each of those charges to then form a dollar amount on your bill. So what goes into those 4 components? We're breaking it down a little bit further. This is how it's made up from, again, an Eversource perspective. And these numbers are subject to change. They'll slightly change based on some recent orders that came out of the Department of Public Utilities. But essentially, the biggest component of the distribution adjustment charge currently are your energy efficiency programs. So we want customers to take advantage of those Mass Save programs, because essentially those Mass Save programs are encouraging and helping customers use less. And ultimately, those include the rebates associated with it, as well as the home energy audits that we do to tell customers the areas that they should upgrade within their homes and businesses. The next biggest piece is that gas system enhancement program. So that's the program dedicated to replacing and repairing leak-prone pipe and aging pipe, and making sure that each time we do that, that's also a benefit to the system in terms of removing those emissions that are ultimately leaking out. And then finally, the next biggest component are the funds used to fund the residential assistance program or our low-income customers. So how do all of these tie into the recent winter? So as I mentioned, this is an example of just the average usage of all of our customers month over month over the last couple of months, and then we also included January of last year just to do a comparison so you could see. So we had a very warm, relatively warm and mild November and December. So you'll see that the usage was relatively low. So the rates that were ultimately in place for this winter heating season went into effect on November 1st. But a lot of customers didn't really recognize or see the impact of those increased rates in those first couple of months of the winter because usage was relatively low. Where we started to see the spike in a lot of these customer bills was once the usage and once we had those really cold days in January. If for those that remember, we also had a pretty cold February. I believe that it was right around, what was it, Meredith, about 30 degrees, similar to January. So you'll see that the average usage for both an N-Star gas customer or an EGMA customer was definitely higher than even just the January previously. So one thing that we've heard a lot from our customers, and we've used meetings like this, we've used other meetings with customers, is, well, we haven't changed, we keep our thermostat at the same temperature all day. We don't change it. It's been at the same temperature, yet our bill is significantly higher. We're not using more. But when we have very cold days, it takes more energy of your system that you have in your home to keep your temperature at that level. So therefore, your usage, you are having an increased amount of usage, even if you're keeping that thermostat at that same temperature. And ultimately, just going back to that first slide, just remembering the amount that you use does impact both your final supply charge and your final delivery charge. However, that said, there were some additional cost drivers specific to the rates themselves. And I know there's a lot of text on here, so I'll try to sum it up. But we wanted to make sure that as a takeaway, when you take these slides, you also had this information at your fingertips. So on the supply side, there was an increase on November 1st, but it was, I would say, very small, comparatively speaking. However, by law, if the supply costs in the region change, and therefore our ability to then buy that supply, like when we were talking about supply, we go out, we buy that supply, the cost we pay is the cost you pay. But because it was colder, there was less supply in the region, because not only were the gas customers using the supply in the region, but also the electric generating stations use gas from the region to power those stations. So as more people are using either more electricity to heat their homes or more gas to heat their homes, that supply and demand, right? There's less supply, so then the demand for it increases, and therefore the price of it increases. And so because that cost for that supply was more than 5% than was the month before, we have to file with the Department of Public Utilities a rate change. Now, if it was 5% less than the month before, we would have to do the same thing and file a rate change to decrease the rate. So we saw a significant increase after January when we had those very cold weeks headed into February. And therefore, we had to file an additional supply rate change for February 1st that increased the supply rate an additional 20%. So that was about an additional $18 on a customer bill for the month of February. For the delivery side, so that was the green portion of the bill, as I said, and you saw it in the pie chart, we've had significant growth in our energy efficiency programs, and that's a good thing. We want people, like I said, to be taking advantage of those energy efficiency programs, but at the end of the day, all of those people taking advantage, all of those incentives, we have to pay through this part of the bill. The investments that we're making in our system, that's the distribution portion of that delivery charge. We've increased the investments we're making from a safety and a reliability perspective. But specifically for EGMA customers, the former Columbia Gas customers, they saw a much more significant increase in their distribution portion of their bill. And that was because of the upgrades that we've made to the Columbia Gas system. So once we acquired the Columbia Gas system in 2020, we did a third-party safety assessment to do an entire assessment of the Columbia Gas assets. And that assessment listed out all of these things that we would need to do to ultimately make the system and bring that system up to a safety standard that would be acceptable for customers. So this is all following, the horrific events up in Merrimack Valley. So as Eversource, we've done a significant amount of upgrades to the Columbia Gas system. And those costs of those upgrades have started to now be realized on customers' bills starting this past November. And then finally, our GSEP programs and the replacement of leak-prone pipe, that was also one of the drivers for the delivery rate changes. So just to put it into perspective from a visual perspective, up on the left-hand side, we have a February 2024 bill, and it's broken out again. The blue is that supply portion of your bill, and then the green costs are the different components, those 4 different components of the delivery charge of your bill. And so what we did was we said, okay, if a customer is using the same amount that they used last year, which we know wasn't the case, we know that they used more this year because of the cold temperatures, but if they were to use the same amount of 143 therms, their February bill last year would have been that top bar chart. So their portion of the supply would be about $100. You'd see that, the customer charge stays the same. The distribution, this is for an N-Star customer, was about $100, and you see that, the distribution adjustment's about $80. But for a February 2025 bill, when you have the additional supply costs, so you see that change, the $30 change in supply, and then you see that big jump in that lime green, that far lime green, the distribution adjustment. Those were the changes that we talked about earlier. So it's about a $72 difference between the 2 years. And what are those drivers? We talked about this earlier, but about 50% of those drivers for that increased bill, like I said, was the increased participation in energy efficiency. The other thing about those energy efficiency costs I just want to highlight is that a lot of that increase was for our low-income customers. So for the Mass Save program, we offer up to 100% of no-cost incentives for our low-income eligible customers. And we saw a huge adoption of energy efficiency measures in the low-income space. 42% of that driver, like I said, for February was that supply change that we saw. So remember that February supply change, and hopefully you're only going to see it really impact that February bill, was a significant increase. This is the same thing, but for a EGMA customer. So what you'll see here is that we have another color as one of the drivers, right? And that color is that distribution. So just going back to N-Star, we don't have a distribution driver because you'll actually see that the distribution portion of the bill went down for an N-Star gas customer, where you see an EGMA customer, that dark green on the left has gone up, and that is about 31% of the total drivers for your bill. And that, like I said, that's all due to the upgrades that Eversource has made since acquiring the assets from Columbia Gas. So what can we do as Eversource, and what have we been doing? Well, we have a lot of programs that are available to customers today that they can take advantage of that will help either manage or lower their bills today. I would say the best possible program that I would have to do is to get on budget billing. That allows for predictability. It smooths out those seasonal spikes. What we're really seeing here, right, is about 2 or 3 months out of the year where we have this spike. Those very cold months. Out of the whole 12 months, it's those months. And then the same happens on the electric side. We've seen that happen in the July and August timeframe when we have heat waves. The electric rates go and the usage goes way up. Budget billing allows customers to plan ahead, and it takes all of your usage. It looks at your last year's amount of usage, and then it basically divides it up to 12 months. And then we do reconciling depending on if you use more or less with that customer. If customers are eligible for the low income discount rate, we have a low income discount rate that customers can sign up for. On the electric side, that low income discount rate is significant. It's about 42%. National Grid, and we're following suit, has on the electric side a tiered discount rate, which allows more people to participate and take advantage of a low income discount rate that also includes more moderate income customers. And it allows for tiering so that not all customers are receiving that same percentage off of their bill. It really depends on your income level of how much of a percentage off you're going to get. So it's more equitably distributed based on the customer's income. We offer arrearage management programs and forgiveness programs. At Eversource, I can say that you can get on a payment plan. A typical payment plan usually is for about 4 months. Given everything that's going on right now with customers' bills, we've extended that to be 9 months. So we're trying to get that information out to let customers know that if they need to get on a payment plan, we will work with them. You know, and if a customer today cannot pay their bill, call us. You know, I think that's one of the things we need to say more. We will work with you. We will work with you to figure out what system and what plan may make the most sense. But if you call us, we will work with you. We are also doing and trying to explain all of this through different bill assistant and customer assistance events. So some of them we're teaming up with National Grid if we're in dual territories. Some of them we're just doing in Eversource or in NSTAR specific territories. These are all the most recent ones. We have some from last week, but we did about 6 or 7 of them in February. I think on total we're aiming for about 20 different events where we have customer service representatives from our call center in person with their laptops, signing people up that come in person to get on either any of those programs I showed you on the last slide or our low income discount rate. We have sent out letters to customers explaining how they can take advantage of these programs, what they can be doing to help lower their usage. We have sent emails. We've hosted customer webinars. We've also then taken those webinars, we've posted them on our website so anyone can go to them at any time. We've translated materials for different languages. We've tried to do press releases and different interviews with different news outlets to try to explain and let them know of the different events we have coming up. We're, of course, using our social media tools, but ultimately, we're using events like this as well to make sure that we can go and all of you can be, our allies and, further explain that these opportunities exist for more information. Another thing that customers can do, and we talked about this, is take advantage of the energy efficiency programs that they are paying for. So we have offered webinars about energy efficiency. We're doing a lot of energy efficiency promotions around all of the different incentives and measures that we offer. These are the opportunities in a home that customers should be thinking about, and we offer programs and different appliances and incentives to help replace the inefficient either appliance, water heater, furnace and offer very, very good incentives because we want people to take advantage of these energy savings programs. These are just some tips, again, that we've been sharing with customers. In addition, as I said, we also have increased incentives for our energy efficiency programs depending on your income level. We work very closely with our community action agencies, our community action partners, or CAPS. We work very closely with Lean and Action for Boston, and we use all of our partners to help get more and more people on these programs and taking advantage of these programs. And the other thing that we're doing most recently, I think is important, is, and I think all of you saw on Monday, is the governor. This is top of mind for the governor and for the secretary. And, they are focused on rolling out an energy affordability plan. We are working very closely with the administration and with the other utilities to determine how can we develop legislative language to help make long-term changes to these customers' bills and customers' rates. So that might be more bill transparency. So that's been something that we've heard a lot from customers, that the bill is too confusing. We've gone through iterations and iterations of this deck to try to make it as simplified as possible, and I'm sure we could do better. And so you think about that and you think, okay, but how then do you explain that to a customer when all they're doing is usually opening up their bill, they're looking at that first page, maybe they'll make it to the next page, but likely not, because that first page they're going to stop and they're going to say, okay, this is what I have to pay, this is my supply portion, my delivery portion. And so how do we make the bill more transparent and broken down in a way that a customer can understand what it is that they're paying for on a monthly basis? So we're working very closely with the administration around that and our regulators around long-term rate relief. So the Department of Public Utilities did issue an order at the end of February regarding their 3-year plan, the 3-year energy efficiency plan. So the 2025 to 2027 plan. They reduced that budget by about 25%. So it's now, it went from $4 billion plan over 3 years to $4.5 billion, but cut $500 million from that budget. Originally, it was a $5 billion plan. And so we're working to determine what that means for the customer. And one of the other things that we did immediately was all of the gas utilities provided immediate rate relief to lower gas delivery rates by 10%. And those costs would be smoothed out and collected over the summer months when usage would be lower. So while it is an immediate reduction, it's a shifting of those costs, and I want to be transparent about that. Those costs will still be collected from customers, but for the most part will be largely offset by the reduction that came out of the energy efficiency order. So it may not be a 100% offset by that energy efficiency order, but it's the energy efficiency cuts that occurred certainly will be prevalent on a customer bill. What that looks like will also depend on the overall usage that a customer uses on that monthly basis. So with that, I'll turn it over to any questions.
Thank you, Erin. Great presentation. We're just trying to figure out interpreters because I think they have to hop off at 8 o'clock. So maybe that gives us time for like 1 or 2 questions.
That's great.
And then I know there's questions from the public also that folks had questions. So that's sort of the second portion of the public comment. So we'll take 1 or 2 questions now and then, yep.
Thank you, Erin, for that explanation and for the breakdown. Much appreciated. And I appreciate the way you talked about the different rates that have risen and how they all can be broken out further. And particularly because of the Mass Save program, the negative attention it's gotten because of the increases. And I was disappointed to see so much negative attention on it. And given that in the long term, it should save us money and work to our benefit collectively. But I'm curious now that the way you broke it out, do we know how much of the increase in usage of that was related to people using rebates for improvements in their homes versus, say, like energy assistance because people can't afford their bills. Like, I'm wondering how that breaks out. What was going on in there, in that increase in the Mass Save program?
Oh, great question. So of the increased costs to Mass Save, how much of that was relative to just the market rate customer incentives versus low-income customer incentives? I don't have that breakdown off the top of my head, but I can tell you that a large driver of the increase that we saw both in 2024 and going forward was the adoption in the low-income programs. So the low-income portions of the budgets did increase significantly because we had such a huge pipeline already in the queue of low-income customers signing up for the programs that we had beyond 2024. So that was taken into account when planning for the 2025 to 2027 programs. And I will say that if you were to look at the programs since conception of, say, the Green Communities Act in 2008 versus now, you have seen a significant shift in where the budgets were. We had the large commercial and industrial customers taking advantage and making sure that their businesses were efficient. We had combined heat and power early on as incentives on the commercial and industrial side. And you've seen a shift, especially as we've shifted to a decarbonization plan, of that more being on the residential side versus the commercial side in terms of the amount of budget and the incentives that we're offering. So there is a significant amount of incentives that go towards residential customers. And of those residential customers, I don't have the breakdown off the top of my head, but I can certainly provide you those breakdowns and numbers.
Thank you, Erin. I just, and I see maybe we can have one more question, but just to, I guess, clarify or maybe a different super quick question. If we didn't have Mass Save though, I guess my question around, would we have spent more, right? Are folks saving money because of Mass Save? So I just want to make sure that we sort of, yes, there is an increased spending, right, in Mass Save, but if we didn't have Mass Save and these energy efficiency programs, how would that have impacted people's bills? And just the second piece around, there's another sort of piece around the cost and global markets, right?
Yeah.
And what has been happening with fuel and Ukraine, and there's all these reasons that sort of the global markets have been very unstable. So just, I guess if you could just sort of speak to that.
So for the first question, what energy efficiency has done for the individual customer that is taking advantage of those programs today and using those Mass Save incentives and making their homes more efficient, they are certainly using less energy in their homes. And therefore, if they hadn't taken advantage and utilized those incentives and those programs, their bills would be that much higher today than they are. I can't give you an exact number because it would really depend on each home and what incentives and what they've done to each of their individual homes. But what I can say is that as a whole in energy efficiency, that has helped in terms of the other side of the bill, in terms of the supply, right? In terms of if there's less usage as a region in that commodity, we need less of it to buy it on the supply side. So certainly we've seen that on the ISO New England market as well. However, when you talk about the supply side, so you mentioned the global markets, we saw, it was 2 years ago, right, with the war, when the war in Ukraine, it was 2 years ago, right around this time, we saw a significant spike in those increases on the gas side. And that's because we don't have any supply in the region. So we don't have any new pipelines coming in. We have temporary LNG and liquefied natural gas in certain areas of Massachusetts. We ship in liquefied natural gas to different terminals, the Everett Marine Terminal, many are familiar with, but that means we're dependent on the global market. And so when we needed that commodity, so did others. And so we saw a huge spike in the price, especially to ship that commodity to the US back in 2022. So on the supply side, what's challenging is I can't tell you what your bill's going to be next winter because I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody predicted that there was going to be a war with Ukraine. Nobody predicted 2 years ago that we were going to have, or 3 years ago, we were going to see that big spike on the electric side as well. So it's really, we are dependent on the market, and there is volatility in the market, and that's because of the lack of supply in the Northeast and in the region.
Thank you. Yeah, that clarifies. And we, just super quickly, I guess we could manage that a little bit, right? If we sort of generated more energy locally in Massachusetts, like solar, wind, and all of those sort of renewables that.
Yes.
Just a quick plug
We
for
can't,
renewables.
yes, we can't bring generation on
Right.
it quick enough.
Right,
That's the
right,
problem.
totally.
Yeah.
I see, we'll do two questions, Cheryl and then Lydia.
Yeah, so back to the energy efficiency part. So I guess I always thought that mass save rebates were paid for by the state. But it looks like in your diagram that everybody that gets those rebates, that cost of those rebates, everybody else pays for. So is the state paying or are we paying? It looks like we are paying. So it's not
Yes.
really a rebate.
So, so customers, yes, it's coming through the utility bill. So those costs, the mass save programs, those programs are run by the program administrators, which are all of the gas and electric utility companies, and the Cape Light Compact runs the programs on Cape Cod. And those costs associated with running mass save and the incentives and the rebates, they're incentives. Some of the programs offer an immediate rebate, but ultimately all of those costs are flow through customer rates on the utility bill.
And so at least where I live, it seems like people with take advantage of those rebates and people with lower income don't get it, but they still have to pay for it.
So everybody pays for it. You're absolutely correct. And I think one of the things that the Mass Save program administrators have heard loud and clear, especially from the dedicated equity working group that exists at the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council, they have taken a very hard look at exactly what you're saying to make sure that since every one of us is paying to ultimately fund those mass save programs, that people are then taking advantage of those programs. And what we have found is that typically sometimes wealthier individuals may have, more education or more access or awareness that the programs exist. And so we have been trying to work with different stakeholders and the equity working group about figuring out how do we break those barriers down? How do we get and reach those customers that haven't historically taken advantage of the programs but need it the most, that should be using, the incentives the most? So it's definitely a problem that exists. It's one that is being actively worked on. And I think that what you would have in the most recent energy efficiency plan, one of the core components of that 3-year plan has a lens on equity and making sure that the communities that have historically not participated in mass save are front and center and get increased incentives, specifically those that haven't participated.
Thank you. And we'll take Lydia, our last question from the council.
So my question kind of follows these two questions. Is there a place where we can find out how costs, how the energy efficiency funds have been spent, by zip code?
Yes.
And also in terms of what they've gone to?
Yes. So, and I can provide this to Jonathan as well, but it's masssavedata.com. And so we have an entire database, and there's drop downs, you can pick which programs you want to look at, you can type in a zip code, it's geographic based, and you can see since 2008, all of the costs that have gone into those programs for that zip code, the amount of usage, and you could see if that usage has gone up, if it's gone down. Hopefully it's gone down for those zip codes because of the programs. And you can pick if you want to look just at the incentives, if you want to look at the costs associated with running the programs, if you want to look at the costs to evaluate the programs. It's broken up into different buckets by program.
So, I work for a community organization, and we did a whole series of focus groups for a consulting agency that was doing this for Mass Save to understand, why aren't people using Mass Save, in different communities, and particularly looking at language minority groups. So we did all of those, and even at the time, I kind of said, actually, we don't have to do a lot of focus groups. I can just tell you what the problems are, but we'll do them. And now, 2 years later, there's already been a report, and now people are coming back and asking us to do more focus groups. And I'm just wondering, there are some very clear issues, like, there are so many different silos. It's actually very complicated for people, and particularly lower income people, to figure out and actually get attention to, when they want to do any energy efficiency work, because there's so many different silos and you get lost. And so I'm just wondering, have any of those, out of all those focus groups, are there some plans to make changes in the way things are done?
Yes, great question and great point. And I think a lot of that information has been shared with the dedicated equity working group that exists to the utilities on how they should be incorporating a lot of those recommendations into their plans. So one example is there's definitely increased focus around languages other than English, a term that I'm getting familiar with. There's lots of different terms. But also one of the other things that they're implementing in this 3-year plan is one dedicated call center. So it doesn't matter if you're a National Grid territory, Eversource, Unitil, Berkshire, you have one dedicated line, and to break down those silos, those call center reps are trained on all of the programs and can be able to speak to the customer in their language preference, but it's all in one kind of one place. I'm not going to use the word clearinghouse, but it's all in one place.
I just want to make
We
one
love
more thing. So
clearinghouses.
I know.
people who live in older homes and have less income don't qualify for Mass Save. They want you to upgrade your home first, and then you can get a Mass Save rebate, which doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't live in an older home that's not upgraded if you had the income. So the Mass Save program leaves out a whole group of people. And this is Massachusetts. There's lots of older homes here.
So, and that, those are all very, very, very good points. And I think one of the other things that they've done is they've expanded to just not low income and those low income qualifications, but also moderate income. And depending, like I said, on your location, they have specific communities that they have assigned as equity communities. And those communities would have, those have been kind of predetermined based on working with the equity working group, figuring out, like I said, which communities don't have that participation level. And a lot of those communities tend to be where there is older housing stock. And then increased incentives to help and remediate. So Nikki, in terms of the geothermal, explained that each home was different. Each home that they walked into was unique and had its own barriers and challenges. And so we took that into account for this next 3-year plan of where can we find those increased incentives for some of those? Because if you have some of those older homes, you're gonna find what Nikki found in some of those homes, which is the knob and tube, the asbestos. You're gonna need those more lucrative incentives to even get you to the energy efficiency equipment, because you can go and buy that equipment, you can get the incentives for the equipment, but if you don't have an energy efficiency home and you haven't weatherized your home, all that efficiency is going to go right through all those ceilings and those cracks.
Thank you, Erin. Well, thank you so much, Erin, for all of the information. Super helpful.
Thank you.
And hope to, have you, back again. Any updates on the programs? But thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so I'm just going to move us really quickly along. I know we have interpreters hopefully still on, but they have to hop off really soon. So we're going to wrap it up and close our meeting, but I don't want to close without giving folks an opportunity for public comment if folks have been here and have waited to speak or to ask a question. So we'll move to public comment, and we'll take folks in the room first. If there are folks in the room that have questions or comments that they want to share, and then we'll move to the virtual hands, if there are any hands or Q&As. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? There's a little bit of instruction. Sophia, could you just share the, right, like,
Yeah,
that
the
again?
interpreters are dropping at 8:15, including ASL.
okay.
And for public comments, there is a two-minute limit, and you need to wait for a microphone, or all of our virtual folks will not be available.
Perfect. So we have 2 minutes left before the interpreters hop. So we'll take one question here. And if there's another question, I don't know if anyone else in the room has another question, but we'll take your question.
I'll be super quick. My name is Sean Luz. I work as Sustainability Coordinator for the city. So just wanted to thank the council for coming here. It's great to see attention brought to this project, and I want to thank the presenters as well. But yeah, thank you for sharing all this amazing information and with the community, and really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming. Really glad that you were able to join us. Is there another question or comment in the room? Okay. So that, unless there's any urging hands up there, Sophia, I don't think
No, I think that was all of the open questions.
Great, we made it to 8:15. So thanks, everyone. Our next meeting is in 2 months. It will be tentatively in North Adams, but we will confirm that once we have a location. There is a survey that is always in the chat right after as we're closing out. And let me think what else.
We do just need to approve to close.
Great, okay. And then lastly, I guess it's 8:14, so we're gonna wrap it up. And any comments or any additional information that I need to share with you all, we can do it in writing.
And what about the minutes, the approval of the minutes?
Yeah, the minutes were already approved. So we'll do a motion to close. Can
Gotcha.
Yep, can I get a motion to close?
Pat Spence makes a motion to close the meeting tonight.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No? Great. Okay, we'll do a roll call.
All right.
Sophia.
Speedy. Kalila Barnett.
Yes, I agree to close the meeting.
Madeline Fraser Cook. Melissa Harding Ferretti.
Yes, please. Yes.
Cheryl Hawley.
Yes.
Caroline Hahn.
Yes.
Lydia Lowe.
Yes.
Marcos Luna.
Yes.
Peter Matthey. Sophia Owen. Jen Salonetti.
Yes.
Patricia Spence.
Yes.
Ari Zorn. Ari Zorn. Miles Gresham. And
Yes.
Maria Belen Power.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Carol.